The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
It's been an exorcism for the Vancouver Canucks. Hughes gone, Horvat gone, Miller gone. Is Elias Pettersson next?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a sports reporter with Daily Hive Vancouver. I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. The Vancouver Canucks have made their biggest move of the season already, but it makes you wonder if another big one is to come. We all know the Vancouver Canucks are not done wheeling and dealing yet. And despite the hot streak they've been on, you know, some of the guys that have been playing well, like Evander Kane, probably Kiefer Sherwood, maybe even a couple others are going to be gone from this team. But Canuck fans know one guy who hasn't been involved in this win streak for the Vancouver Canucks is Elias Pettersson, out with an injury right now. Also a guy that hasn't said a word since Quinn Hughes got traded from the Vancouver Canucks over a week ago. Those two were supposed to be anointed as the future of the Vancouver Canucks. And it does make you wonder, is Elias Pettersson, a Canuck for life, just like his contract says? Or is he going to be traded before the end of that contract? Could he even be traded sooner than we think, considering where the Canucks are at in the standings and considering the history here with Elias Pettersson in Vancouver over the past 2 years? Because Canuck fans know it has been almost 2 calendar years since Elias Pettersson has been that player for the Vancouver Canucks. And what's happened in those 2 years? You've seen him get into a fight with JT Miller, again, broom behind the scenes for a long time. That led to JT Miller's trade. You had a no-show in the playoffs in there. And now you have Quinn Hughes traded. And just to add to that, shout out to Patrick Johnson of the Province, reporting that Hughes and Pettersson drifted apart over the past couple of seasons. Two guys that, from the outside looking in, were pretty close. Both breaking into the Canucks around the same time. Both anointed as, the number one center and the number one defenseman for the Canucks, heading towards their future. And of course, it's all completely changed over the last 2 years. But I think with all the noise that's gone on, everyone's been focused on Quinn Hughes. Everyone was focused on JT Miller at the time, a little bit of Pettersson last year. But now that even though he has the no move clause in his contract, I still wonder if this guy truly is going to play it out for the rest of his contract in Vancouver, whether that is some kind of bounce back, if you're a Pettersson believer, whatever that may look like. He's certainly been better this season, but I've said it before and I'll say it again, every dayers know, he does not look like a bona fide number one center, at least on a cup contending team. It does make you wonder about Elias Pettersson's future. And just look at this Canucks team right now. You've obviously had 3 new guys step into the lineup, younger guys on this team. But when are the Canucks actually going to be competitive again? I think if they went full tear down rebuild mode, we've seen it. Like, you're probably looking at 5 years. If the Vancouver Canucks can pull off this hybrid rebuild, I know some of you saying they already pulled it off, 4 straight wins. But if they can pull off this hybrid rebuild, maybe it's a couple years until they're back into contention. And is Elias Pettersson going to be a major part of that? Is he going to be a number one center on a cup contending team? Or do the Vancouver Canucks have to go out and find another number one center to get the job done? It's pretty rare. In fact, I'd say borderline impossible in today's day and age to win a Stanley Cup without a number one center on your team. And I do wonder if Elias Pettersson is going to be around for the next time the Canucks contend for a Stanley Cup. He's already 27 years old, so my instincts tell me no. And then that leaves the choice of Elias Pettersson with the no-move clause. And the Vancouver Canucks to an extent. Although, I think right now, if they haven't already, and they've shown in the past by threatening to trade him before that contract, he signed that. It does make you it does lead you to believe that they've looked at potentially dealing Pettersson. They'd be stupid not to use Alvin's terminology. He didn't use it necessarily about Pettersson, but saying he'd be stupid not to look at what's out there. The Canucks would be stupid not to look at what's out there for Elias Pettersson. And when you think about a potential return, I think the two most recent blueprints you have are the JT Miller deal and the Brock Nelson deal. Now, I know with Pettersson, you think you should probably get more. He's younger. He's been much more productive throughout his NHL career. You also have to give him quite the commitment, right? 7 more years, $11.6 million. I know people see that and say, there's no way he's getting traded. We're stuck with him. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Because I think right now, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, every Dares know. Elias Pettersson, if he was on a Stanley Cup contending team as your number 2 center, a guy who can create offense, a guy who can hold his own defensively and play that matchup role, he's still a valuable player in the NHL. But again, on a cup contending team, he's probably more of your number 2 guy. Or in some kind of 1-2 tandem like we saw in Vancouver, right? When he was at the apex of his powers. And look, again, if the Canucks are going to contend in, let's say, 3 years, Pettersson's going to be 30 years old. I don't see him getting back to that 100-point level by then. I don't even know if he's going to get back there now, but I still think he could be a good number 2 center on a cup contending team. And that does make you wonder, are there teams out there willing to bet on Elias Pettersson? Now, you do have some teams that have already thought about the idea of giving up some major assets to bring a difference maker in. Of course, that difference maker was Quinn Hughes. He's in a different stratosphere as Elias Pettersson. But one of the teams, and we'll talk about it on the other side too, the Carolina Hurricanes. According to Elliot Freeman over the weekend with 32 Thoughts, they were the number 1 contender to land Quinn Hughes before Minnesota stepped in and offered what they offered for Quinn Hughes. Carolina's been interested in Pettersson before. They have a number 1 center in Sebastian Aho. Could they be a team, not to mention they have some cap space, could they be a team that circles back on Elias Pettersson? I think that's a guy that would fit their structure pretty well, too. I think they see it. Could they be a team that makes a pitch for Elias Pettersson? Montreal, I look at them. They've been looking for a 2C forever. I know they got some young options there. They've taken some dart throws and haven't necessarily worked with the Kirby Docs and the Alex Newhooks. They've liked Oliver Kapanen there. But Pettersson could easily slot in behind a Nick Suzuki there in Montreal. They got the assets to give it up. Would Pettersson want to waive to go to a market that's more hockey mad than Vancouver? Hard to know, but I just think that anything on the East Coast is it's getting closer to that house that he's built over in Sweden. The Dallas Stars, a contending team with Rope Hintz and Awad Johnson, plays some center. I would argue he might be better suited to the wing. Could Dallas step in? Tyler Seguin's now out for the season as well. The Washington Capitals, I thought about them, but they do got quite a bit of center depth, but they were interested in trading Connor McMichael before. Could they be interested in trading him again in a package for Elias Pettersson? And maybe a couple other outside teams. How about Utah? Speaking of beautiful places in the world, Pettersson likes beautiful places. Man, oh man. Let me tell you about Utah. Home of the Red Rock. The Salt Flats. Salt Lake City, baby. And for Utah right now, they got Nick Schmaltz playing as their number 2 center. Of course, he's in more of a number 1 role now with Logan Cooley on the shelf. He's also a UFA, now one of the biggest UFAs in the market coming up at the end of this season. If Utah doesn't think that they can keep Nick Schmaltz, I know they got a center like Caleb Desaulniers in the system. Could they look at a guy like Pettersson in a trade? And they got young assets too. Could you get one of Daniel Boot or Tij Aginla out of the Utah Mammoth for a guy like Pettersson? And the last team I considered is the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres were apparently right there in the Quinn Hughes sweepstakes as well. They look like they want to make a big move. And what's with the analytics right now? A lot of the analytics sites out there think that the Buffalo Sabres, have a legit shot at the cup. What the hell's going on? Could Pettersson be the guy that takes them over the top? And look, with the deal with the Buffalo Sabres, you're not getting a Thompson, you're not getting a Rasmus Dahlin, but could you get a guy like Alex Tuch? Another pending UFA, similar to that Nick Schmaltz situation. If Buffalo doesn't think they can keep Alex Tuch obviously has some ties to the Vancouver area. Showed it to White Rock, a few blocks away from where I'm recording right now. That's where Tuch's wife is from. Could Alex Tuch be part of a Pettersson deal coming back? Another player in that organization who I really have my eye on to is Noah Ostlund. Now, the Canucks already got Liam Ogren. Noah Ostlund would complete that World Junior line, that line that played together in Djurgårdens, I believe it was, in the Swedish Junior League. Ogren, Ostlund, and Lekkerimäki had chemistry in the past. I think there would be some interest from the Canucks perspective in terms of bringing in a guy like that to play with a couple other, 21-year-olds that have profiled as NHL players. A line that's shown chemistry in the past. Is there a deal for like an Ostlund and a Tuck and a draft pick out of Buffalo for Elias Pettersson? Now, he would have to waive to go to Buffalo. The odds of that might be low, but again, if Pettersson's looking for a change of scenery, and the Canucks might be looking for a change of scenery too, would it be best for all parties to move on? Would it be best to finally exercise this roster of players who didn't want to be here, or were part of the problem here for a stretch in Vancouver as things fell apart? Kyle and I did that episode right when the JT Miller and Pettersson story broke from Gary Mason. We were warned about the trade. The episode was called How to Murder the Vancouver Canucks. This core and this roster died with that feud, exacerbated by the Horvat trade. Now you have Horvat, Miller, and Hughes gone, and I really am starting to wonder, could Elias Pettersson be next? Let me know in the comments. Am I crazy? Am I out to lunch? Or is there a legitimate chance that the Vancouver Canucks try to move on from Elias Pettersson? Whether they're successful or not, let's talk about the idea of, could the Vancouver Canucks finally move off of Elias Pettersson? I'll try to get some of your comments into the side. I'll also talk about, again, mentioned it a few minutes ago, Elliot Friedman reporting that Carolina, the closest team to acquiring Quinn Hughes potentially outside of Minnesota. What could that have looked like, and did the Canucks make the right call? That's all coming up next here on Locked On Canucks. All right, before we get back to the show, let's shout out our friends over at Gametime. And man, oh man, the Vancouver Canucks wrapping up a 5-game road trip. Got a lot of home games coming up in January. I will be at most of them. So again, I'm just going to remind fans, if you're on Team Tank, the Canucks are 1-6-1 still this season when I'm at Rogers Arena. I know they're like 4-10-1 overall, but they're close to 500 if you take me out of the rink, okay? If you're on Team Tank, you want me in the building. And tickets have been dropping recently. Maybe you just want to go check out a Canucks game. If that's the case, the cheapest tickets you can find are on Gametime. You can also find tickets for NFL as well. I got my eye on Seattle Seahawks playoff tickets. Going to cost a few bucks. That's why if you like and subscribe, you're going to help us out a lot. But again, you're going to find the best deals on Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off, and download the Gametime app today. Man, oh man, the holidays are almost here. I just got back out there trying to finish off my Christmas shopping today. And one of the stops I've made over the last little bit has been checking out our friends over at Doer. Because not only is Doer keeping me sexy, but they make the world's most comfortable pants. I've never worn jeans like these before. I put these jeans on and started singing, I believe in miracles. Woo! I love them. Comfiest pants in the world. And that's because these jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. Again, you can be comfy, you can be sexy, and you can do it all by checking out our friends at Doer. Not only that, but you get a promo code if you're listening right now. Mention our promo code Locked On Canucks in store for 15% off your first order. You can visit them here in Vancouver at 1757 West 4th Avenue. If you want to check them out online, you can do so as well by visiting duer.ca/Locked On Canucks. Again, for 15% off. That's doer.ca/Locked On Canucks. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day. And, man, first off, shout out to Kyle Bowen. A great episode after another Canucks win on Saturday night. Lots to talk about after that game. Shout out to Liam Ogren putting on a show for the Canucks. Shout out to Evander Kane with one of his best games as a Canuck. And shout out to Kyle Bowen for holding things together while I'm slacking off. But you know who never slacks off? The commenters. Tim O'Donnell, maybe I'm not sure if he's trolling here or not, but PD is the next captain of the Vancouver Canucks. He's not going anywhere. Ooh, I don't see that happening, but we did reminisce on that last week. The fact that Bo Horvat endorsed Pettersson as the next captain of the Vancouver Canucks. How far have we come since then? That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable that at one point Horvat was endorsing Pettersson to be the next captain of the Canucks. Hughes got it instead. Now Hughes is gone. And there's not many people here that I've run into, maybe aside from Tim O'Donnell and his trolling, that want Pettersson to be the next captain of the Canucks. I think what's more likely is that Pettersson gets traded and becomes the next captain of the Vancouver Canucks. I feel very confident in throwing that out there. Dan Jardine with his own trade proposal in the comments here. Petey and Sherwood to Carolina for Stankoven, a first and a second. Ooh, I think you could probably get a bit more than that, to be honest, considering how good Sherwood is. I think the Canucks are going to deal Pettersson. Again, they don't have to deal him, right? I think they can afford to try to find a team that's willing to actually pay up the assets needed for Elias Pettersson. But the Carolina Hurricanes, I could absolutely see them being in that mix. And according to Elliot Freeman, this is one of the teams that almost got Quinn Hughes from the Vancouver Canucks. So Freeman wrote about this Friday night, Saturday morning, talking about how Carolina, according to a few of his sources, was the front runner to get Quinn Hughes before Minnesota stepped in with their offer. Talks about how the Canucks, they really wanted to trade Hughes to an Eastern Conference team. That was his preference at the end of the day. All the power to him, boom, bam. But then kind of lists through the teams that, Detroit wasn't willing to give up the assets. The Rangers didn't have the assets. Neither did Philly. New Jersey couldn't figure out their cap problems. And that really left Carolina with the cap space to make the deal and the willingness they've shown in the past to make a big swing to try to compete for a Stanley Cup. And one of the pieces that Freeman, he mentioned as an assumption, but I think it's a safe one, is that if the Carolina Hurricanes did try to get Quinn Hughes, Alexander Nikishkin was probably the centerpiece of that deal. And for me, that just creates another fascinating what if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan. What if it was Carolina that made the deal for Quinn Hughes and not Minnesota? What if we got Nikishkin back over Zeev Buium? Which player would you prefer to have if you're a Canucks fan? And I think the easiest, or not the obvious, but I think the correct answer is Zeev Buium. That's how I felt thinking about this over the weekend. But even diving into the numbers, I feel more confident about it now. Now, here's the one caveat. The Canucks have made a mistake before in targeting a higher ceiling player. And that's really what I see for Buium versus Alexander Nikishkin. Zeev Buium is the higher ceiling player. You talk to anyone in Minnesota, they believe, and now they watch Buium as a prospect, maybe more than Quinn Hughes in the NHL, who knows? But they believe that Zeev Buium's peak, if you could hit it, is Quinn Hughes. I don't quite see that. One comparison I've thought about a lot for Zeev Buium recently is Josh Morrissey. And not to say a small defenseman, but undersized defenseman who skates really well, is good on his edges, can find his teammates, and can be a number one defenseman. But I think that's probably a more realistic tier for Zeev Buium than Quinn Hughes. And look, you can win with guys like Josh Morrissey on your team. I know Winnipeg's had their moments. They haven't necessarily gotten there, haven't had the playoff success. Hey, at least they made it to the conference finals once in the past 10 years. That's something the Canucks haven't done. But I think that's more realistic ceiling for Zeev Buium. Now, Alexander Nikishkin, when I was talking to Kyle earlier, he thought like Nikita Zadorov now. Nikishkin is big and physical, but he's not quite as big or as physical as Zadorov. But he's a more well-rounded player. Now, I do find it interesting this season in Carolina. They tried to ease him more into that shutdown top pairing role. But really, those minutes have gone to Keandre Miller without Jacob Slavin in the lineup for a long stretch there. His offensive production is nearly the same in the NHL as Zeev Buium. I think Buium actually has a couple more points. I think Nikishkin, last I checked, was 4 goals, 13 points in 33 games. Buium was 4 goals, 16 points in 34 games. And he's 3 years younger. So again, for me, I believe the Canucks made the right call going for the higher ceiling player in Buium. But this is my Canucks trauma coming out. But the last time that I can think of where the Canucks made a big call over the player with the higher ceiling was JT Miller versus Bo Horvat, right? Now, again, so many extenuating circumstances in there. I don't think that's a fair comparison, but it's worth noting that one of the big decisions this management team made in Vancouver was choosing Miller over Horvat. They chose the higher ceiling player. It did not work out. I'm just hoping the Vancouver Canucks made the right choice here, choosing the higher ceiling player in Zebuyam over Alexander Nikishkin. Now, we don't know exactly what the package was coming back from Carolina. A lot of people assume it was something like Nikishkin, Stankoven, and a first. Could have been a Nikishkin, Stankoven, and 2 firsts. If that's the case, then I think you're talking about a hell of a debate if you're the Vancouver Canucks. Now, when I've theorized this in the past about the Quinn Hughes trade, every dayers know, I think you target a team has a chance of falling out of the dance. Get their first rounder in a year or so from now. And Carolina's a team I don't really see falling out of the dance. That's an organization that's drafted too damn well. They have one of the best coaches in the game. So, again, I think it's interesting looking at Nikishkin and Buyam, and it's 2 players I'm going to look at moving forward for quite some time, thinking now about who Quinn Hughes could have been traded for. We're talking about the reported 2 highest bidders for Quinn Hughes, and you're talking about Buyam and Nikishkin as your 2 potential centerpieces. So that's something I'm going to be following for years to come. Feel free to let me know in the comments as well, whether it's on YouTube or connect with us after the fact. Check out the link for the Discord in our bio as well. Did the Canucks make the right call in choosing Zebuyam over Alexander Nikishkin? All right, let's cut to break here. On the other side, let's shout out the Goats of the Week from last week. Now, there's been some sad times doing Goats of the Week of late, but last week was a good week, unless you're on Team Tank. That's fair. But it's also nice to enjoy wins, okay? Then the Canucks won them all last week. And let's get to the 5 best players from last week in Goats of the Week on the other side here on Locked On Canucks. All right, before we get back to it, let's shout out our friends over at FanDuel, baby. FanDuel, the place you got to go if you're betting on NHL, NFL, NBA, or UFC, man. They got it all. Even esports. What? Unbelievable. The Vancouver Canucks tonight taking on the Philadelphia Flyers. They, of course, are underdogs. No respect for the Vancouver Canucks. Winning games with David Kampf as their second-line center. So stacked that they can scratch Nils Höglander for 2 straight games. And they're underdogs against the Philadelphia Flyers. Plus 108 in the money line if you're believing in the Canucks to win tonight. Let's see. Anytime goal scorer. Who we liking for an anytime goal scorer tonight for your Vancouver Canucks? How about Kiefer Sherwood? He's actually like fifth among Canucks in terms of scoring odds at plus 320. A guy's been heating up lately. Marco Rossi plus 330 to get his first goal as a Vancouver Canuck. Or if you want to ride the Liam Öhgren trade, he's plus 850 to score tonight for the Vancouver Canucks. When you're betting on FanDuel, check out the same game parlays, the live in-game bets. They got it all. Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day, finishing off the 5-game road trip tonight. Can they go unbeaten? Can they go unbeaten on this 5-game road trip in the post-Quinn Hughes era? That's something that I certainly didn't see coming in. I wish I had the video to pull up right now. But just to let you know, Kyle said, after the Quinn Hughes trade, maybe right before the Quinn Hughes trade, spewing off being emotional that if the Canucks won 4 in a row, he would eat a U-shaped hot dog in 1 bite. Let's see if I can find a photo of it for you on YouTube here. Kyle said he would eat this foot-shaped U of a hot dog in 1 bite if the Canucks won 4 in a row. Well, Kyle, the Canucks have won 4 in a row, man. So I hope you're practicing your throat exercises. I hope you're brushing your teeth, making sure that your chompers are ready to chew. Because man, oh man, the Canucks have won 4 games in a row, and Canuck Nation is waiting for you to eat a foot-long hot dog in 1 bite. I don't know how you're gonna do it, man. But hey, you made the promise, not me. Man, oh man, the Vancouver Canucks again, 3 wins in 3 games last week. They've won 4 in a row dating back to last Sunday. And let's talk about the 5 best Canucks from last week here in Goats of the Week. Man, oh man, there's been some sad renditions of this. There have been some times where I've ripped through this in 30 to 45 seconds. But last week was a pretty damn good week for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, I wasn't here for the post-game show on Saturday, but one thing I wanted to say, because a lot of talk about the Canucks, they got buried in the shot clock and whatnot. I thought that was an incredibly gutsy win against a good Boston Bruins team at a time when they, were on the second end of a back-to-back with an undermanned roster, with no Quinn Hughes, with no Elias Pettersson. They scratched and clawed their way back into that game. We heard Boston after the game talking about how, they had a 3-2 lead in the third, and they let their foot off the gas. They let Vancouver back in the game. A couple of quick bingos from two guys who, of course, make it here on Go to the Week. Next thing you know, they're chasing the game. And even though they tied and, had chances to win in overtime, they couldn't prevail. And that was a game that the Boston Bruins probably felt like they should have won, and rightly so. But I wanted to congratulate the Canucks because we've talked about it time and time again this season here on Locked On Canucks. It's this team looking like a bunch of individuals rather than connected guys playing like a team. And what I saw on Saturday, maybe outside of the power play, which looked a little choppy for some good stretches, was a team playing for each other, grinding hard. Definitely a lunch bucket group out there, working their rear ends off, maybe lacking a bit of talent up front, but they were working their asses off last week. And shout out to them for winning some games. Winning's fun, man. The main reason they won last week, and let's start with the first go, is Thatcher Demko. Of course, had the longest shutout streak of his Canucks career. Played 2 of the 3 games last week. Lets in 1 goal. Nearly shuts out the Islanders after shutting out the Rangers earlier in the week as well. Thatcher Demko, man, this guy can definitely be a player that ruins the tank. I see some talk in this market about, could the Canucks trade Thatcher Demko? I think this team has next to zero appetite for trading Thatcher Demko. I think there could be an appetite for trading Elias Pettersson if you can convince him to waive his no-move clause. Again, they bet on Pettersson. He let them down. Been at the circle of a lot of issues with this team over the past 2 years. I could see Canucks management wanting to move on from Pettersson. I do not think they have any appetite to move on from Thatcher Demko, who played like a stud last week, the deserving number 1 GOAT of the week. The number 2 GOAT of the week, I'm not sure if this is going to surprise some people because it shouldn't, but Filip Hronek. 4 assists in 3 games last week, and more importantly, a guy that looks like a legit number 1 defenseman. And we've said this here in Vancouver. Every time Quinn Hughes has been out of the lineup, can Hronek step up? Like, this is his spot. Can he do it? Of course, he's not Quinn Hughes, but he is and has looked like, in those albeit smaller sample sizes without Quinn Hughes in the lineup, he has looked like a number 1 defenseman. I think one of the biggest surprises to me since the Quinn Hughes trade are the fact that Hronek and Marcus Pettersson all of a sudden look like a number 1 pairing. And again, I think some weaker matchups, right, against a depleted Devils team, a Rangers team that lacks any bite, but a team in the Islanders that, is top 10 in the NHL, even after losing to the Canucks in terms of points. A team in the Boston Bruins that has been better than everyone expected. And Hronek and Marcus Pettersson had good games. Filip Hronek last week, the only players on the ice for fewer scoring chances attempts against per 60 and shot attempts against per 60 was like the Ogren, Carlson, Sasson line. And Hronek's going up against the top dogs every single night, and he's getting the job done. Great skater, great in battles, and a guy that's trying his ass off out there and looking like a number 1 defenseman. So for me, very deserving. Number 2 GOAT of the week. Number 3, I'd keep for Sherwood. Has the hat trick against the Islanders. Almost single-handedly won the Canucks that game. In general, though, just looking like a dog out there for this team. And, it's the right thing to do to trade him. But I'm going to miss him when he's gone because he's a ton of fun to watch and certainly one of the best players on this team. Number 4, Linus Karlsson. And maybe a bit disrespectful that I'm putting the guy who led the Canucks in points last week, at least tied with Filip Hronek with 4, as a number 4 GOAT. But Hronek, Demko, and Sherwood deserve it, man. But Linus Karlsson, finding a way to contribute, looking like an NHLer. I'm having a harder and harder time shaking the Thomas Holmstrom comparison out of my head. Ironically, the Canucks play the guy who made that comparison tonight in Rick Tocchet and the Philadelphia Flyers. But Karlsson, again, it's pretty impressive to me that a guy like that is staying in the lineup ahead of Aatu Räty and Nils Höglander. I would not have predicted that coming into the season, but he has earned his right to stay in this lineup every night. And number 5 is Liam Öhgren. That game against the Boston Bruins was spectacular. And it had me thinking, like, is this kid for real or did he just play the best game of his life? And he's gotten everyone excited. But it was a good week from overall, right? scores his first 2 goals of the season after being pointless in his first 17 games. Now has 3 points in 4 games with the Vancouver Canucks. Great skater out there. Gets back defensively, hard in the corners, physical, pushing Hampus Lindholm out of the way to tip that puck in for the Vancouver Canucks in Boston, giving them a 4-3 lead in the third period. Of course, scores the shootout winner on a sick move as well. This kid's been exciting. Again, he's excited me more than I thought he would after his first week with the Vancouver Canucks. All right, that's your goats of the week. I'm going to get out of here. Again, game's going to be in about 2.5, 3 hours from now. I don't think anything that happens in this game will dissuade this notion of could the Canucks trade Elias Pettersson. I think it's probably more possible than you think. I'm Trevor Beggs. Make sure you hit the like button. Helps us out a lot. Subscribe to the show on the podcast side. Go follow us. Leave a 5-star review. And one love to you and you and you for listening to this episode of Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.